They looked like normal malls, bright lights, happy crowds. But behind the glass and smiles, something darker was waiting. These aren't urban legends. They really happened. I think it's common knowledge these days, but most adult stores aren't what people used to imagine. Sure, maybe in the past, they fit the stereotype. Trenchcoat guys slipping in and out with magazines wrapped in brown bags, like they were sneaking around. Now, they're clean, organized, and have a surprisingly wide range of customers. There are no shady booths behind curtains, no crusty carpets, no background moans coming from somewhere in the shadows, no grainy VHS tapes from the 80s looping endlessly on an old TV in the corner. But shops like that did exist, and I used to work in one. Let's just call it Angel's Delight, ironically the name of our competitor that my bosses despised. It was in a dying strip mall in the middle of nowhere. And believe it or not, despite selling adult toys and DVDs, our store was one of the most normal places in the entire building. I don't like to trash people, but man, some of the other tenants there. The tattoo artist whose stick figures looked diseased. A piercing parlor where every new earring felt like a gamble with infection. The liquor store that sold more questionable substances than just alcohol. And then there was the uptight couple who ran a fashion boutique like it was a holy mission, only to visit our shop every Friday and leave with oddly specific adult films. The husband always claimed they were cleaning up the streets with a wink. But if that were true, why did their taste always focus on one very particular type of movie, with the same cast, same producer, and oddly detailed plots? Maybe they just liked the storytelling. Either way, I didn't care. Their money helped pay my rent, and without customers like them, I would have been drowning in student loans. I'd only been in college for a year when the debt stress forced me to take a break and find work. The job market wasn't kind, and oddly enough, working retail in a sex shop paid better than most gigs. You'd think it'd be hard to find someone willing to work there. Turns out, I was only the second applicant. I asked about the first one. My boss just said, he scared even our crowd, and left it at that. I never asked for more details. And honestly, I started to consider a future in that field. My boss once told me, the 2000s are going to be big for adult retail. That was in 2002. He truly believed it. But then something happened that made me drop everything and return to college. It was a quiet Friday evening just before closing time. Most stores were already shut down and ours stayed open later than the rest. Mr. and Mrs. Purity had already made their weekly visit. Then the front door slammed open so hard it knocked the bell loose. And that was just the beginning. This tall, lanky guy, must have been 6 feet 6 inches, stormed in. Not bulky or built, just long-limbed and intense. He walked straight up to the counter and dropped a brown bag with a loud thud. "This thing's broken," he growled. "I want my money back." I pointed behind me to the giant no-return sign. "Can't do that," I said. "Make an exception," he snapped. I was already on edge. We'd heard stories. Sometimes people tried returning used items as a joke. So I wasn't about to reach inside that bag. "What is it?" I asked. "Hey, can you take it out?" With a dramatic sigh, he pulled out the item. A rubber inflatable mask. Something you'd find in very niche corners of the shop. A hose ran from the mouth to a small pump. I hadn't even noticed it had sold. "It's ripped," he said, pointing at a tear around the neck. Maybe the thing had just aged out. Rubber does that. Still, no returns meant no returns. The only way he'd get money back was if I paid it myself. And I wasn't about to hand over $20 from my own pocket. "Guess you should have been gentler," I muttered. Yeah, I was being sarcastic. And yeah, it was a mistake. In one swift move, the guy reached over the counter, grabbed my head, and slammed my face against it. I felt the pump jam against my temple. He didn't whisper. He hissed into my ear. "You sell broken junk and expect us to pay for it?" His grip tightened. I thought my skull might crack. I stammered, "No, sir." "I want a refund," he said again, and I froze as something cold and metallic pressed against my head. "Give me a refund." When he finally let go, I stumbled back. I didn't see a weapon. Maybe there wasn't one, but my hands were shaking so bad I gave him $30 just to get him out. He smiled, thanked me, and left, mask and all. I didn't call the police. No one did that in our mall. I told my bosses what happened, expecting disbelief. Instead, they just nodded. "Oh yeah, that guy," one said. "Next time, just give him the refund," the other added. That night, I decided I was done. I gave my notice the next day, finished out my last 2 months, and walked away from the adult retail world for good. Just to be clear, I'm from the UK and have a bit of an odd job. I travel all over the country, mostly at night, fixing vending machines, jukeboxes, and old arcade games. The company I work for trains people like me to handle repairs on machines that businesses rent out for public areas. 90% of what I do is vending machine related. Usually something silly, like a packet of crisps jammed in the coil. And no one wants to risk shaking the thing. Not that I'd recommend it anyway. It voids the warranty. Sometimes, though, the gigs are more interesting. Like when I get sent hours away to fix a Mario Kart machine. If I'm lucky, it's a real vintage arcade cabinet from the 80s. Those are built like tanks. Just need the occasional fix-up. Tonight's job was at a motorway service stop connected to a large mall. After closing, only the service station remained open. It was a wide, open space with fast food stands, a small arcade room, restrooms down a hallway, and a shuttered entrance to the now-closed mall. I pulled into the car park, and the mall looked like a massive, dark brick fortress. The glowing lights of the service station felt comforting after the long drive. I was exhausted and desperate for a hit of bad coffee. A few other vehicles were scattered in the lot. I hauled my tool bags from the van and stepped inside. It was warm and smelled like McDonald's. My stomach growled, but the rule is, no food till the job's done. I grabbed a black coffee with 2 sugars from the machine and headed over to the task, a 2-player Mario Kart arcade unit. One seat was loose, and one of the steering wheels wasn't responding right. Just a bit of tuning up. Job was done in under 30 minutes, faster than I'd expected. I'd been so focused that I hadn't really noticed my surroundings. I'm not one of those people who scan every detail of a place like they're in a crime documentary. There were 3 fast food stalls, seemingly all manned by a single tattooed, bored-looking guy. In the far corner sat a group in hoodies, probably teenagers. And at a central table were 2 young women, early 20s, chatting casually. They looked friendly, so I gave a quick nod, then went to order my usual Filet-O-Fish meal. Yep, I'm that guy. Got my food from the grumpy worker, found a table, and started in on my fries. Halfway through, the group in the corner stood up. As they moved, I saw they were all fairly tall, except for one short figure. Not weird, just something that made me second-guess their age. Then I saw the masks. Not theatrical ones, just scarves covering the lower half of their faces, with their hoodies pulled low. The exact image tabloids love to spread about youth crime. I didn't panic. Thought maybe it was a prank. I hoped so, at least. The group came over to my table and just stood there, staring. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound chill. I'm not a pushover, but I wasn't keen on stirring trouble. I glanced at the girls to see if they were reacting, but they weren't. Then one of the guys shoved the table. Not too hard, but enough to rattle me. Classic intimidation tactic. "All right, lads, I'm just trying to have my dinner. No need for this." One of them giggled. Then the one who pushed leaned in close and said, "Got a problem, mate?" "Great. Tough guy routine." "No, just eating my burger." "Just eating my burger," he repeated mockingly. Another one copied him, and then the third slammed a gloved fist on the table, spilling my drink. I caught it before it fell. "Come on, lads. It's not worth the hassle." While I was distracted, the short one had moved behind me. I felt hands on my shoulders. The voice behind me was low and strange. I couldn't tell if it belonged to a kid or a girl. Probably both. That's likely why I didn't instinctively elbow whoever it was. "All right, forget this," I muttered, standing. The one behind me jumped back to avoid the chair. I grabbed my gear and headed for the exit. Of course, they followed. "Oi, you leaving already?" one jeered. I'd had enough. I dealt with my share of bullies in school, and I wasn't about to let a bunch of masked kids ruin my night. As I walked into the car park, I hoped someone inside had the sense to lock the door behind them. Maybe this wasn't their first time doing this. At my van, I didn't want to turn my back on them, so I tossed my bags through the passenger door while facing them. I discreetly pulled a socket wrench from my tool bag and slid it up my sleeve, just in case. "Right, I'm off," I said, slowly moving toward the driver's door. I figured staying cool was better than acting scared. They just watched. I got in, started the engine, and reversed. I thought that was the end of it. Then they charged, ran straight at the van, banging on the hood, laughing like maniacs. I jumped in my seat. They didn't care that I could have hit them. I slammed the gas and spun the van in a wide arc, speeding toward the exit. They slapped the sides as I passed, then faded into the shadows. I thought about hitting one, but if one of them was a kid, that would have been worse for me. Later, I stopped at another service station to check the damage. A long, thin scratch down the van's side. Looked like a knife mark. I called my boss and the police. They said trouble happens there often, and they'd check it out. Never heard anything back. What scares me is how it ended. The way they just snapped. Like animals. If I'd confronted them head on, I'm convinced I wouldn't have made it out of there in one piece. I grew up in a place where certain tragedies are even more taboo than in Western culture. People don't like to talk about them. This story is one of those, shared with me by my mother. In our town, there was once a shopping mall that had recently been demolished. I remember going there as a child. The place was always bustling. Happy faces, families shopping, people enjoying themselves. The lower level held a food court that filled the air with smells from freshly baked cookies to international dishes. It felt magical to me, a world of colorful toys, stylish clothes, and endless discoveries. Visiting with my parents, siblings, or friends was always a joyful event. Around the age of 6, I remember learning that the mall was going to close. I cried. I thought my father would lose his job. But he didn't work for the mall. He was the manager of a clothing chain inside and had just received a promotion. I moved on with life and forgot all about it. Years later, I came back home for a visit and saw the mall in the news, its final fate sealed in demolition. That's when I found out the real reason it had closed. It happened during summer, just after closing hours. Though the mall was small in area, it was very tall. 6 floors, with the food court on the ground floor, toys and electronics above that, clothing and home goods further up, and offices and a stationery shop on the top floor. In the center of the building was an open vertical shaft with a large sculpture in the middle. On sunny days, the light would strike it just right, creating a rainbow shimmer. Due to the open design, Every level had strong glass barriers to prevent falls. I remember peering over those glass panels as a child, unable to fully see down. They rose above my head, probably chest height for an adult. My dad's store, a men's fashion outlet, was located on the third level. That summer, they held a product launch party featuring a collaboration with a famous designer. A small crowd of journalists, photographers, and select customers were there after hours. My mother says she left the store briefly, not something she normally did, just to catch some air. She was only outside for a minute when it happened. Across from where she stood, someone fell. A man in a brown suit, falling straight down through the central shaft. His coat flapped like wings, and his tie snapped in the wind. Near the end of his fall, a shoe flew off. She saw his expression change, first confusion, then fear. But not a single scream. He didn't make a sound. And then he vanished from sight. She doesn't speak of what came next. But I know enough to understand that from such a height, a person doesn't remain a person upon impact. The aftermath was so horrific that rather than clean it, they shut the mall down permanently. But that wasn't the only reason. The man who fell was the mall's owner. The place was drowning in debt, on the verge of bankruptcy. Authorities called it a tragic accident, a fall over a chest-high railing on a night the mall should have been empty. Maybe he slipped while adjusting something. Maybe he wasn't alone. Or maybe it was intentional. But where I come from, you learn quickly what you can and can't ask about. Now all that's left is a collapsed building and the memory of the man who fell from the sky.